Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning for those on the other continent. We welcome you to the ASEAN Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform webinar series. Today is webinar 5 of the series on the just transition to an inclusive circular economy in ASEAN. My name is Dr. Surasa Kantaratanaku. I'll be your facilitator today. Now, I'd like to begin the webinar with some housekeeping rules of our webinar. First of all, because this is a Zoom meeting, we would like to ask all participants to keep your microphone mute so that we have the least interruption in the session as much as possible. And also, I'd like to inform everyone that the session is being recorded. It will be uploaded on our website as well as YouTube. And I'd like to invite everyone, participants, speakers, everybody to participate and send questions to the chat box. And the moderator may address your question during the panel, or we may address your question during the Q&A session. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our chair, Dr. Tony Pramonrat, also Mr. Tri Suwit Ariyawat or Kun David, to give a brief introduction to our session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sirasa. My name is Anthony. I'm at the ASEAN Center for Sustainable Development Studies and Dialogue. My colleague, David, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is David, the ASEAN Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform Manager at ACESP.
Great. Shall we go straight into the next session, Dr. Sirasa? Is that the plan?
Okay, yeah. If you would like to go into the next session, that's okay. We can go straight in. So next session, we have a presentation, introduction presentation done by Dr. Tony. The session is called Towards a Just Circular Transition. What is a just circular transition and what will it take to realize it? Right. Please welcome back to the floor, Dr. Tony.
Thank you. Let's have the first slide. Thank you. Who is controlling the slides?
Kun Unis.
Okay. So Kun can I have the first slide?
This one? Which one?
The PowerPoint. Towards
so
just.
Is it not this one?
Can you show it? I don't see it on the screen yet.
Do you see
sorry. We've shared it, right?
Yes, I can see the screen. Dr. Tony, do you see a PowerPoint being shared on the screen?
No.
No?
Oh, okay. Wait a minute.
Could David, perhaps if you're in the same room, you could help Dr. Tony out?
One moment. I see it on the screen. Let's see, how do I? Sorry, let me just.
No worries.
Okay,
is Kun David happy to be? Oh, wonderful. Okay. Wonderful.
Thank you. This is the first slide. I think for me, this is going to be a robust session. I wanted to start as quickly as possible because I wanted to leave as much time for discussion. And I think, anyway, towards a just circular transition, the key words here are just. I would also add that circular transition is also a key word, which I think we'll get to throughout our webinar today. Okay, with regards to the benefits of the circular economy, clearly, I think this is quite. All of us have seen this slide before, but I believe that with regards to climate, the adoption of the circular strategies consists of 4 key sectors. If you look at the economy perspective, steel, cement, plastics, and aluminum, which could decrease global emissions from key industry materials by approximately 40% by the year 2050. And with the estimated growth of 6 million jobs, the estimation globally by 2030, waste management and recycling and services sectors, including repair and renting models, Thank you. Next slide, please. Again, what is a just transition? And I think I'd like to put the word just transition in italics or quotations for further discussion. But basically, in this particular slide, there are three forms. One is distributive justice, which are how the cost and benefits of this current one-way or linear system is distributed, and will they be distributed in a circular fashion? And who carries the burdens of the transition? Procedural justice, who has the influence, who decides, and who is involved? Is the decision-making process managed or inclusive, or do all stakeholders have a seat at the table? Again, I'd like to also circle stakeholders as a concept. The recognition of rights, how are marginalized views and narratives, knowledge and values recognized and integrated into the dominant narrative, and which institutions can guarantee recognition and protection of rights during the transition process. Next slide, please. What then should a just transition look into? And here we look from the industry perspective. There are three sectors within the ASEAN context that are, I guess, front and center. And they include mining and electronics, textile and garments, and waste management. Next slide, please. With regards to mining, which is a critical sector in ASEAN with many producing countries, circular economy entails the need for more recycling, more reusing, and ultimately less mining. Even a transition to lower economy needs rare materials. And one example presented here in this slide is in Myanmar, which is the single largest source of heavy rare earth elements globally. With circular economy, electrics should last longer, should be reused, repaired, re-engineered, but eventually fewer units may be produced. With this particular aspect, I'd like to highlight the practice of consumption. I mean, if it's going to be fewer units, then we have to identify how we consume less. Business opportunities are also likely to emerge in the recycling, repair, and rental services. Now, on this, as I said earlier, consumerism, I think, is a missing point in this particular slide, and I'd like to just highlight that. And how do we approach, manage, or consider consumerism, as the reduction in demand. Next slide, please. In a circular economy, clothes and fabrics will have to be eco-designed to ensure recyclability from the outset, and environmentally friendly materials produced techniques will be needed. Textile is an important employer, especially for women in several ASEAN countries. And examples here are provided for Cambodia, Vietnam, but they exist in all countries in ASEAN, with a large proportion of women working in the industry. Next slide, please. In the waste management area, there are many challenges and opportunities. In the circular economy, single-use plastics should be reduced, but recycling industries may prosper. Employment opportunities in the waste management and recycling industry should probably increase. In the waste management area, which is currently in all of our countries, a relatively large informal sector in a number of ASEAN countries. As waste management becomes more formal in a circular economy, informal waste pickers may be marginalized, and I think the challenge here is how to bring them into a more upgraded role, meaning more highly paid, but part of a more organized sector. Next slide, please. Now, there are policy tools, and I think for a just transition. A combination of policy tools include forms of regulation, forms of taxation, training, and incentives are considered to be the main instruments that can foster a circular economy. There also are the creation of funds for affected sectors and communities. I think highlighted here is the BLT, or Bantung Langsung Tunai, basically a cash transfer project for vulnerable communities in Indonesia is one example, and a larger one, or an established one, is the EU €5 billion Just Energy Transition Fund to address societal, socioeconomic, and environmental impacts on workers and communities that are adversely affected by the transition from coal and carbon dependence. I want to add here that I believe from a cursory search, I think Indonesia and Cambodia have already accessed this Just Energy Transition Fund from the EU, and I think that's a good example, I think, for many other countries to consider, to follow up on. Next slide, please. Now, on this particular slide, I wanted to look at sociocultural aspects, as we are in this project, on this effort, working under the ASEAN sociocultural pillar. And basically, to do that, we want to reduce the risk of a poorly defined or ill contextualized just transition concept. I believe I took this subtitle from the ILO, but correct me if I'm wrong on this, because I thought it was an appropriate phrase. And I wanted to identify just a couple within Thailand and a couple of other countries on the sufficiency economy and circular economy and their commonalities. Despite seemingly being distinct approaches, they share some key concepts and overlap that may contribute to a more sustainable future. One concept is reduced resource consumption. Both aim to minimize the amount of resources we extract from the environment. The sufficiency economy focuses on consuming only what we need, while perhaps the circular economy emphasizes keeping resources in use for as long as possible. With regards to long-term sustainability, both recognize the limitations of our planet's resources and promote practices that ensure a healthy environment for future generations. In the environmental protection field, by reducing resource use, both approaches lessen the environmental impact of production and consumption. This includes reducing pollution, waste generation, and ecosystem degradation. And both shifting from focus from production to well-being, I think, is sometimes an idea that has not been discussed enough, in my view. Both move away from the traditional economic model that prioritizes increasing production and consumption. Sufficiency economy emphasizes living a balanced life with fulfillment beyond material possessions and to find that balance. While at the same time, circular economy focuses on creating value from what we already have. Next slide, please. So I believe that identifying common values and concepts within ASEAN will contribute to a longer term and perhaps a more just transition economy. And the example here is that sufficiency economy tackles the how much we consume. And I think that is perhaps a philosophy, but a way of practice for individual citizens. While circular economy can focus on the how of production and consumption cycles. So I believe this particular phrase needs to be looked at in its entirety, in a holistic fashion. They can complement each other to create a more sustainable economic system. And just a cursory search on the web, I think, can identify other common values. Gotong royong is a common value on values of mutual assistance in consumption and production, which is quite common in Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia. And looking at the Filipino EPR law that they have launched in 2022, I found interesting concepts directly in their EPR law on shared responsibility, or kapwa, resourcefulness, or diskarte, respect for others, or pakalang, nature and the world, kalikasan, and utang na loob, which is gratitude, reciprocity, and long lasting. So they actually included these into their EPR law. And there are many others. Just a final example in Vietnam, I think thrift, respect for nature, and living a long life are directly related to sustainable consumption, production, and circularity. So I'd like to end there. I think this is my last slide. And I'd like to hand it over to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tony, for the presentation. It's a good introduction to our next webinar. So for all our participants, keep an eye out for our next series. Next, we have a good lineup of speakers for you guys. We have a panel discussion on global perspective and international approaches to just circular transition. And in this panel, we have Eric Roeder, technical specialist on green jobs, climate action, and resilience at International Labour Organization, or ILO. We have Dr. Tay Lipley, who is an advisor at ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community, or ASCC, in the Department of Research and Development Platform on Media, Culture, and Arts. Next, we have Ms. Chloe Pottinger-Glass, who is the Research Associate at Stockholm Environmental Institute, or SEI Asia Office. Lastly, we have Ms. Veronica Mendizabal-Joffrey, who is a Senior Gender and Social Development Specialist on Climate Change and Sustainable Development at ASEAN Asian Development Bank, or ADB. Moderating this panel, we have Ms. Elodie Maria Soup, who is a key expert on the EU policy development and partnership building at the Switch Asia Policy Support Component. Please welcome Ms. Elodie and her speakers.
Thank you so much, Teresa, for these introductions. And thank you also, Dr. Anthony, for putting us in context and setting the stage in a way on defining what a just transition would be. As some of you may have heard in the past, just transition is a term that was mainly used in relation to climate and a lot to the energy transition in the 90s in the United States. And now it's being used more widely for other environmental challenges, especially now we see it more about the concept of circular economy and how we can handle these changes, yet keep justice within our societies, and how to do that in Asia. So I'm very happy that we have these four panelists with here today. And I would like to ask each of you two questions that you can answer just one or just broadly, more from a global perspective, but we're also interested in the examples you may give. So I'd like to know for you, what are the keys to a just transition? And also, how can policies aiming to stimulate a circular economy ensure just transition? So it's a bit, well, what are your thoughts on the transition to circular economy in general, at a global level, or in Asia in general? And also, if you can give us some ideas of the policies that can ensure this just transition. So I'd like to start with Eric first, and perhaps you'll give us a nice perspective in terms of labor issues with your background at the International Labour Organization.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so first, I'd just like to touch a little bit more about just transition from the ILO perspective, because it comes from the labor side, so it's tripartite. So for us, a just transition is, is a goal to undertake climate change actions that equally advance job creation, of course. So when we talk about job creation, that means on moving towards a green or low carbon economy. So jobs that would be created as we transition towards a green, low carbon economy. And then social justice is the key pillar of just transition for the ILO. So social justice or social dialogue means it's tripartite. So to move forward, to really see a just transition, and what we, from the ILO perspective, is that we want to have the employers, the workers, and the government all at the table together. And there's reasons why it's tripartite. And one reason is, I can only share a bad example, and this is where a country had decided to move to organic agriculture as a policy. But the problem was that, and it sounds nice, but the problem was they didn't reach out to the farmers. So the farmers actually were subsidized for more industrial input-based agriculture. These are fossil fuel-based herbicides, pesticides, and so forth that they were subsidized to use, and they weren't ready for the transition to something that was greener. So this is, from our perspective, why a just transition, the idea is to leave no one behind, and it is tripartite. So, and this is cutting across, looking at environmental quality and resilience to improve economies, generate lower emissions and environmental impacts, and then jobs and income gains increase, and then negative social impacts are minimized and addressed. So we see lots of examples where we're policy examples like Indonesia's grand strategies guide for economic transformation towards a green economy. So we're taking the steps, and now the next step it would be implementation. So with that, let me come back to you.
You're muted.
You're on mute.
Yeah, I was muted.
Yes.
Thank you thank you so much, Eric, and thank you, yes, for bringing back this idea of participation. That was a little bit in the idea of procedural justice that was presented by Dr. Anthony, who has influence, who decides, who is involved, who is in the decision-making process. And what you described for one country of Asia that I will not try to find out which one it is, but I think it is. I know it's also happened in Europe, actually, and we've seen the same process with the EU Green Deal, also in the farming community, because there was a feeling that the Commissioner von der Leyen expressed, saying, actually, we need to go back and sit again around the table and talk about this transition. And on this, I'd like to invite Chloe to also share her thoughts on maybe the keys to just transition in her view, especially with her background in urban development.
Sure. Thanks so much, Elodie. And I think that's a great segue, because I was just about to say, I would really like to use this platform to call attention to the importance of looking at just transition and inclusive circular economies in our cities. So why is that? I think that we've all heard this figure everywhere, that right now just over half of the world's population live in cities, and that's going to go to 2/3 by 2050. So this means that the decisions that are made on an urban scale and the practices and behaviors of urban dwellers are going to have a massive impact in terms of our carbon emissions. And we also know, of course, in ASEAN that cities are incredibly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And the most vulnerable urban dwellers, so for example, outdoor workers and residents of informal settlements, will be the worst impacted. And so my research has looked a lot into what do we actually mean by just transition in cities, what kind of sectors are going to be affected, what kind of people, what will the labor markets look like. And so there's a lot of great examples. I think one, of course, is the informal waste sector. And so in Thailand, I mean, it's very difficult to know actually how much the sector contributes because of its nature as informal. But in Thailand, there's estimations that they could be responsible for up to 75% of all recycling in the country. And I think this figure might be quite common across different ASEAN countries. But the jobs are incredibly precarious, poorly paid, and hazardous. Workers are often excluded from social security systems. But I think Dennis will go into this in the next panel, so I'll leave it a bit to him to elaborate more on this. So maybe one other topic I'd like to bring up that wasn't mentioned so much in the introduction is food systems. But circular food systems, particularly in cities, is going to be super important because so much of food production is being channeled to urban consumers. And so, for example, we can look at what's happening with urban agriculture. So I don't think we can ever reach a point at which we can produce all the food that we need for cities in cities. That's not very practical. But there's some fantastic examples of urban agriculture schemes in cities in Asia, which are doing a lot for an inclusive circular economy. So, for example, in Bangkok, there's an organization called Bangkok Rooftop Farming that we've been working with. And they occupy a disused rooftop space above a shopping mall. And in that mall, there's a food court. So they utilize the food waste from the food court to make compost, and they grow vegetables for local distribution on that rooftop. And it was incredibly cheap. So it needed an investment of just 50,000 baht per year, which is about $1,500. And over 3 years, they managed to recover the initial capital costs, and now they've become profitable. And so they're looking to expand to up to 19 more sites. And I think this is a really interesting example because it combines the concept of the circular economy with social enterprise. It helps to cut food loss and waste, and at scale, it could lead to a range of jobs, such as in agriculture, operations, logistics, delivery. And it can also help to increase the amount of nutritious food available at a local scale with a short supply chain. And so when we talked to Bangkok Rooftop Farming, they said that the most important thing is the need to change attitudes in Thailand so that people no longer feel scared of soil and insects. So I think this is a really interesting point on how we can try and change attitudes and sustain the societal shift that's needed towards circular approaches in cities. So I think I'll pause for there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chloe, and thank you for giving us two examples in two concrete sectors, the waste collection in the urban setting, but also food, and how we need to look also at a sector-based solution. Thanks a lot. And now I would like to invite Ms. Veronica to give us her perspective. And given her background more in gender, I'd be interested in your views in how the circular transition can be just from a gender perspective.
Thank you very much for the invitation to this important discussion, and good day to all of you. And thanks also for the very inspiring presentation. Let me start by indicating that we at the Asian Development Bank, ADB, are proud to be the climate bank of Asia and the Pacific. And this vision has enabled us to pledge $100 billion in climate finance by 2030. And we're making very good progress in this regard. Last year, we committed about $10 billion in climate finance from our own resources. Now, we acknowledge that climate finance and climate action have to go hand in hand with social development. And as such, two of our strategic corporate priorities are focused first on addressing remaining poverty and inequality, and second, accelerating gender equality in the region. So in terms of a just transition, much of our work so far has been focused on the energy transition. This, of course, given the importance of this sector to climate mitigation. And we expect that the energy transition will require a massive shift toward renewable energy sources and technologies. And this in turn will rely on critical minerals and metals. And in this sense, we need to bring circularity to the discussion on risk mitigation of this likely extensive resource extraction. We need to discuss recycling and reuse and ensure sustainable supplies of these materials. I am afraid, however, that this aspect has not been sufficiently highlighted in energy transition plans. So my first answer to your question would then be that it's key to embed circularity in key transition sectors. Energy is a critical one with large implications, particularly in terms of the equitable distribution of cost and benefits. And now in terms of cost and benefits or risks and opportunities, I would like to contribute some thoughts about gender equality in a just transition, regardless of a sector. And the first aspect, which is key, is to acknowledge that a just transition would need to mitigate the risk of structural inequality. And for gender inequality specifically, this requires understanding that women have different and in general lower levels of ownership and control over resources, be it land, technology, or finance. And this has large implications for participating in and benefiting from green transitions and circular economy processes. For example, in Cambodia, we are undertaking a study to try to understand in detail the gendered barriers that female entrepreneurs from micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises face when trying to transition to a green economy. So we're really keen in the results, and of course we will be also happy to share this with Switch Asia. The second is the need to focus on opportunity. As the circular economy can create new jobs, as has been mentioned by Dr. Anthony during the presentation, in areas such as waste management, recycling, repair, refurbishment, and new product and product design. But this will require deliberate interventions and awareness to leverage women's potentials to establish businesses in these sectors, and a focus on skills training and capacity building. As it has been mentioned by the previous speaker, by Chloe, and during the presentation, many women are already engaged in circular economy activities, many in the informal sector. In Indonesia, for example, there are approximately 17,000 waste banks, and most of these are managed and run by women. The issues, of course, is we know informal workers face low wages, lack of social protection, and exposure to health hazards. So formalizing and improving these working conditions can increase the benefits of a transition to a circular economy. I'll stop there.
Yes, thank you so much, Veronica. And what I hear from you is that there will be a need for policy intervention on top of the dialogue that Eric already underlined for just transition to happen. It may not happen just naturally. So there is a need for policy intervention. Thank you for the inspiration and ideas from Cambodia. And now I would like to invite Dr. Lipli, to perhaps wrap up this first panel. I understand that you had a series of questions that I'm looking forward to hearing to kind of inspire us about all the challenges that may occur in charting a path towards just circular transition.
Well, I don't have any answers, so I just wanted to pose some questions because ASEAN is only at the beginning of this journey, and it's a very diverse region. So I mean, you asked me to talk about what are the keys to a just transition. I don't have the answers, but I thought this discussion is kind of occurring outside the policy circles and the think tank circles. So I was also wondering where is it situated? Is it industry? Is it, you know, I'm not sure. So if we understand where it's situated, then we can have a more directed discussion as to where it's headed, right? And also, how do we how do we deal with pre-existing asymmetries in the power dynamics between the EU and ASEAN, and with the different development trajectories across the region, right? So I think the different speakers that have spoken have talked about it from a sectoral perspective or a narrower perspective, but I also think it's important to kind of think about the more general issues that would affect the discussion regardless of where or the scale you are dealing with, right? So the bigger questions, I believe, are the EU Green Deal, right? So when we talk about the just transition, whose justice are we talking about, right? Are we talking about the EU's justice, and which sector are we directing our discussion at? Or are we talking about ASEAN's justice? And from these different perspectives, we would come up with different approaches, right? So if we look at ASEAN's perspective, then ASEAN is not a monolithic organization. There are different member states with different political, economic, social and cultural interests. And how do we navigate this terrain? And how do we then deal with the interaction with the different stakeholders in the EU as well? Because while I don't have any answers, I think these questions are really important to consider, because the position that you arrive at is a result of contestations, right? On different players with different interests and gains to be made, you know, at different points in time and on different issues. So yeah, so while the EU Green Deal, you know, stresses the social dimensions and then the economic dimensions, and also like how you need green technology, there are also questions on the technologies, right? So we need to also ask, where does ASEAN fit in? How would it fit in? How would the different stakeholders benefit or lose from these interactions? So I think that's all I really have to say. I mean, I don't have any answers, but I think these are important discussions to have. And also, what have the different stakeholders been consulted, and the quality of the consultations? I think these kinds of discussions also need to be taken into consideration.
Yes, yes, indeed. Thank you, Dr. Leapley, for asking these questions, which are, yes, part of the transition itself, to ask them, for it to be just, to wonder what are the power dynamics, what are the different realities of the different stakeholders. We must ask them to be able to find the answers in each context, whether it's geographical, sectoral. Thank you very much. And on these words, I think we're very good. We're right on time, and we can pass the floor for the moderator to guide us to the next panel. Thank you very much to all the speakers for your input. It was really insightful to hear from you from your different perspectives, which are quite different about a just circular transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elodie, and all the speakers. Next, our panel discussion, Balancing the Growth and Equity, a Just Transition of Circular Economy in ASEAN. So now we're going to scope down on the practices on each country that our speaker represented. The first speaker, we have Dennis Schaefer, who is a team leader for Prevent Plastic Project. Next, we have Ms. Neila Moja, Corporate Accountability and Climate Justice Advisor at Manusia Foundation. And lastly, we have Ms. Gao Suwarnapul, who is the Country Director for CARE International at Laos PDR. And in this panel, we welcome back to the stage again, Dr. Tony, Dr. Anthony Bamoratana, the Deputy Director at the ASEAN Circular Economy Stakeholder. Please welcome Dr. Tony and all the speakers.
Thank you, Dr. Sirasa. Very good discussion for panel one. I think it's integrated in the sense that you look under ASEAN diversity, the different values, the different principles, and how do we bring that up? How do we have this interactive brainstorming between these concepts at the international level and at the regional level? I think all of our speakers have been briefed. You know, I think I'll just start with Dennis. If you can talk us through about the plastics project in Myanmar and how you see this working out at the country level. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Anthony. Yeah, so for Myanmar, when we talk about just transition in the sustainable waste management or the circular economy context, we have to speak about the so-called illegal waste picker. So why they are illegal? Because in Myanmar, in the big cities, the city development committees are rightfully the owner of all waste which is being generated. So this means only the waste picker which are employed by these governmental departments are able to manage the waste, and everybody else who is somehow, in any case, try to manage the waste is directly becoming an illegal waste picker in this case. Which is an interesting system because the development departments, they are not really able to sustainable manage all the waste. This means they are not able to pick up all the waste and they are not able to recycle or somehow to manage the waste. And the interesting part here is also in Myanmar language, you call the waste picker actually palang. I think my pronunciation is terrible, but this is, when you translate it, it means palang means actually all things buyer. So they are not being addressed as a waste picker, they are being addressed as all things buyer. It is very interesting because the reuse system and also the recycling system in Myanmar would not function without this illegal waste pickers. So the waste pickers, they are collecting door to door. They are also buying, for example, old electronic things. Then they decide by themselves, okay, what I can do with this? Should I bring it to a repair shop? Maybe we can make profit out of this when they are repairing an old computer, for example. So they buy it from the households, they bring it to the repair shop and sell it. So they are like a trading company, basically, you could say. For the also for the waste, for example, they extract the plastics. There is no waste segregation systems right now here. So what they do is they collect the waste, they segregate everything which is sellable, and the sellable things they are handing over also to the junk shops or to the waste aggregators, and they make profit with this kind of system. So what we do is we have a township in Myanmar which is called Shrepita. So our project is working there with some of these illegal waste pickers. And we try to make, because most of them, they are like, they are working against each other. So they try to, of course, maximize their profits by maximizing their households, which have, let's say, high valuable waste, and they are working against each other. So what we do is we try to create cooperatives with different waste pickers. The one cooperative has 10 waste pickers. We try to get the allowance from the governmental departments that they don't have to pay so much, you know, on the table money or something, that they can operate freely without having any, without being afraid that somebody will come and take away their push carts or something, and that they are working together instead of against each other to really maximize the waste collection, that they also cover all households, and that they also can maximize their profits. And we also try to give them like basic trainings, like handling trainings for safety, how they can handle the waste, maybe which kind of waste they should not touch without any, you know, safety equipment and such kind of things. But we also give them some education on how to manage their financial income and outcome. I mean, we are talking really about, unfortunately, very uneducated persons who are mostly working in this direction, and we try to educate them as good as we can that they can work together. Yeah, I think that's for now it. So Anthony, I will give back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. I think that's a very good description of developing cooperatives working together, and I think raising the level of their, I guess, expertise. I think, and hopefully there will be part of a system that actually will give them more money. And I think the idea of the all things buyer is quite a good. It's quite it seems like a very good description of you know, a fair description that they are actually traders. Can I pass on to Kun Kao, yeah, to talk about your program in Lao PDR, please? Especially, I think I've heard so much about your coffee program, working with women there.
Thank you, Dr. Anthony. Maybe before that, I start briefly about CARE. So CARE focus on poverty reduction with a strong focus on social justice. And I think as many of you might know that we have women and girls as part of our, is a center of our development. So we in Laos, we are part of the Swiss Asia. We are running a project called Sustainable Production and Ethic, Responsible and Women Empower Coffee Value Chain. So another word is Super V Coffee Value Chains Project. And we work with 400 farmers and over other 4,000 beneficiaries. So I would say that when it's come to just transition and linking to what CARE has been doing, I think I want to echo a few of the participants here around leaving no one behind and gender equality. And I think for CARE under this Super Week project, when it's talk about the women's role in the Super Week Coffee Project is about inclusive participation and opportunities, of course. And it sounds simple, but in fact, when we so the work that we do with the women coffee farmers, but also majority of them are from ethnic groups. So when we actually looking at social norms of the people we work with, decision-making power, household responsibility that involves. So at CARE, what we do is we have three approaches where we focus one on the individual agency, second is on social relation. And then thirdly, I think somebody here also mentioned about institutional structure that's sometimes links very closely to how justice will work and how it's translated into the policy. So in maybe coming back to the production part of it. So of course, when involving the production cycle of it, the engagement and participation of women at every process is very important, and that is, I think, the core the core work that we've been doing, because it's involved. I would say even starting from awareness, the awareness of the women that we work with around, around the activities that they get involved, how it will benefit them, but also, what kind of skill development that it will involve for the women to be part of it. So coming back to the, talking about the individual agency, even like, for example, two of the activities that involve, for example, the coffee processing, where we're going focus on water recycling, or using coffee fab that will involve in producing into fertilizer, or biochars, it requires women also to many of them cannot read, cannot understand. A number of women do not have the decision power to even be part of the discussion at the cooperative level, for example. So the work that we do involve at every single level, and then we work together with women to ensure that they have the knowledge, understanding, and also have the techniques, negotiation power in order to participate very meaningfully in those processes. And that's almost repeated the whole cycle from production into, distribution to marketing. And maybe I also, when it comes to policy level as well, that require a lot of efforts, for our project to really work to ensure that we support women to reach what they need to achieve on the ground into how that can be influenced to the institutional level and then policy, and what changes they would be able to to bring when those policies change. I think those are the reflection. Some very small example, but I would say that across the work that we do on the gender equality, it seems to be a small cross-cutting area, but when it's go deep at the grassroots level, there's a significant work and effort that have to be done together, not only with the women agency, but also the group of people that associate with and also there's a structure that lie in the in the context that we work with. Thank you.
Thank you, Khun Kao. I mean, you've raised a whole range of very interesting topics. I mean, you just not work with Lao women, but you identify that there are many ethnic groups that you work with. And I think the terms that you used on just, fair, and inclusive participation, I'd like to ask a further question that the women's groups or individual women that you work with, how do they view, in their traditional practices or in their concepts, how do they view, how do they see a just or fair or inclusive participation? And with regards to, like you said, decision-making process, they will be more involved in the decision-making process in the production, distribution, and marketing, because it has a more gender equality. But I wanted to ask you, how do you think the women that you work with view this? Because as you stated, at the grassroots level, it is very cross-cutting. And so how do your participants, your workers view this, and how does the wider context in the community, or how do men view this as well?
Yeah, thank you. So I would say that for most of the women we work with, especially the ethnic minorities, it starts from awareness, and that's mean that even working the women to help them to realize their rights. So it's right realization, and I think that's usually is that missing because of the social norms and many prohibit factors, that come with the social norms and the lack of knowledge, awareness, and understanding on including limited education opportunities. So I think everything for us is start from rights realizations and how we work with the women to understand their rights, and also then linking to more awareness, understand, and then what what they need to do, what skill they need negotiation skill, for example, in order to advocate for their participation and the areas that will benefit them to be I think the most important part is that the women economic justice and how they would benefit from that, and then also ensure that they can be empowered to raise their family and be part of contributing to the community that they work with.
And other community members support this as well within the village, the community, and the wider district?
Yes, I think definitely. I think the approach that we are trying to work on is to ensure that it's right realizations, but also the negotiation, very positive, way of engaging with the, I mentioned earlier, social relations, and how the women can work with others, starting from their family members, in order to, for them to step up.
Okay, thank you very much. I think
Thank you.
this conversation leads directly to Nelia's point on at the Manusia Foundation. So, without further ado, could I ask Nelia to say, to expand on this discussion that we've done with both with Dennis and Gao. Nelia, please.
Yes, thank you. So indeed, it's the points I wanted to raise today are really linked to what have been said previously, and also to the introduction that you gave with those concepts of distributive justice, procedural justice, and recognition of rights. Who decides who is involved in the decision-making process, and are the people who should be involved being recognized? So what I wanted to discuss a little bit here is the importance of including local communities and indigenous people's rights in this conversation. If we are taking Asia and Southeast Asia, so just one figure, so there is an estimate of 300 million indigenous people worldwide. 2/3 of them are located in Asia and 150 in Southeast Asia. So it's a big population here. They are at the forefront in terms of facing the impact of climate change. They are also impacted by, they may be impacted by just transition projects, energy projects, for instance. And their situation across the region is, you have some countries that are more advanced in their protection, but overall, we can say that they are still not being properly recognized, and they are still missing at the table. If we take the example of Thailand, for instance, indigenous people are not yet recognized under Thai law. There is a process, there is a bill being currently drafted, but they are still not legally recognized. And it's key to have them because of the impact they suffered, but also because they can bring solutions. If we take the example of agriculture, they have traditional way of farming that have been that are efficient in terms of climate mitigation, and also in terms of providing communities with livelihood. So it's really important to have them, but also to think it's one thing to say, okay, we need them to participate. We need local communities. We need people on the ground to participate. But then we need to think how we make sure that they can indeed participate. Concrete steps to make sure that they are enabled to participate. So things, very simple things, such as if you want to have like local farmers attending a meeting, well, that's great. But then it means that they have to leave their farm for like a day or two, and then who is taking care of their activity? They need maybe to hire someone. So you need to think of, okay, maybe we need to compensate them because the time that they are spending at this consultation, it's a time that they are not spending on their farm. So really trying to think of concretely how we can ensure that those big principles of inclusivity, participation are effective in reality. I think I'll stop there for now.
Neela, I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking of an Indonesian friend of mine who runs a relatively large NGO, and when the international consultant comes to Indonesia on this particular project, the consultant says, I need you to come and see me every day for the next 2 weeks. You know, and the international consultant is paid $500 at that time, a lot of money a day. But the local, my friend who runs the NGO, he says he doesn't get, you know, oh, the international consultant is very dedicated, you know, he's here for a week and he wants me and other people to come, you know, the whole week, every day, because it's an important project. But he can't leave his NGO, you know, and he has to travel, and he doesn't get a per diem, but it's for the benefit of the project. So I'm giving you a challenge to answer this. You know, how do we address this situation?
Oh, I don't think I have the answer. But that's indeed a big issue. And it's like a bigger issue of funding, like the funding system of grassroots organization, making sure that the people who are doing the work on the ground and are being like have access to fundings. And so yeah, I don't have.
You did say that, you know, perhaps we should provide some sort of, you know, some sort of funding so that they can have somebody to tend their I mean, something like that. Is that, you know, is that one way out, or is that something which
it is something that can be implemented like concretely, like when we are
doing that?
When we are working with communities, and when we are organizing like workshop with them, so we need them like to come, for instance, to Bangkok. We are paying per diem, to make sure that they can actually dedicate this time to work with us.
So there's, I mean, you've highlighted quite a serious drawback with regards to working with indigenous populations, and we do take note that, you know, at least 150 million of them are within Southeast Asia, and I think these are not just people that are migratory, but these are, you know, the actual owners of the land, and they have their own cultural values and practices and things like that, which should be part of the stakeholder consultation.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay. I'd like to, I think we're on time, just on time. I think, have there been any Q&As or questions and answers that you'd like to run through? Sirasa, that I think that you'd like to
There's no question in yet. There's some comments saying that this discussion of offering per diem that still is not effective, and perhaps sometimes it's not realistic in the local context. And also beside policy, funding regulation needs to be more conducive for equal participation as well. Perhaps we can move into a Q&A session. I've been inviting participants to send in questions. So for any of you who have any question for any speakers, any moderator for the first panel, second panel, please send in the question. In the meantime, while we're waiting for the question, I'd like to welcome back Miss Elodie Soup back to the stage to perhaps address the question that Dr. Lipley has asked us at the end of the first panel.
Yes, thank you, Sirata. I think I liked Dr. Lipley's intervention because she rightly pointed that there were some power dynamics. So she pointed at geographical ones, maybe between continents, but it can also be at a more like meso level within a country itself, or the ones that Chloe hinted at within the waste sector, or that Eric hinted at within the agricultural sector with the farmers, etc. So maybe I can call upon Eric to explain a little bit more about the power dynamics in the trilateral talks of the ILO and how ILO itself sees beyond just having the three entities in place, the unions, the employees, the employers in each sector, but how it is that this dialogue can be nurtured and cultivated through policies.
Hi, Eric, are you with us?
Maybe I didn't call.
Perhaps we might start with another speaker.
Okay, so maybe Chloe, you'd like to give it a try? Maybe taking the example of the waste sector.
I don't think I can comment on this exact question, but I did have some thoughts as we were moving through the different panelists on some themes which were emerging. And I just wanted to touch upon something. So Dr. Lipley asked the question of where is just transition situated? And we also heard in the introductory remarks about, the need for participation, procedural justice. And I think we've heard a few different examples of how this works. And I would just like to underscore the importance of supporting collective action in its various forms, whether this is labor unions, associations, co-ops, and how important this is for ensuring a just transition to circular economy. And I think it was also briefly touched upon, this question of formalization of the informal waste sector. And this one's really interesting because it's had kind of mixed results. So for example, it was actually Pune in India, as far back as 1993, informal waste workers actually banded together and they demanded their rights as providers of this essential service. And so they were granted health insurance and they were granted the official license to operate by the municipality. But in other places, like in Thailand and Vietnam, we see that there's a bit more reluctance from waste workers. They're worried about things like taxation, or whether there might be some regulations on their activities. And so I think the important thing is that there might not be any one size fits all solution that works in every country. But if we can just look to what's actually working really well in a particular place, and look to see how we can support things like associations through which these workers can actually build up their collective bargaining power, I think this would be a really fruitful starting point. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chloe. And I saw also specific circular associations emerge in Europe of repair people and related to the circular economy jobs that have a little bit disappeared in the last decades in Europe but are emerging again. There's new associations coming around that. So there might be different ways to unionize in that sense in ASEAN as well that may be coming up.
Could I just ask Chloe one question?
Yes, of course.
Do you have any experience on, like, when you call repair associations? I think in many countries in ASEAN, there are these people that fix computers. They have these. They look like watchmakers, and with microscopes and things like that. And I think in Indonesia there's quite a lot of that. And have you ever thought of developing? There are thousands of these people. You can see them around the city. That and they have an association, but to upgrade that association and to work with large companies like Hewlett Packard, I think has launched at the Circular. Elodie, you probably know better. In this the World Circular Farm on electronic waste. And to build up to work these people to at a higher level, meaning that they get more money. To work at as an example. Has SEI ever thought of, we could be electronics waste, but other sectors to bring their level up, to be more money, but then to be more, I don't know, organized.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually in Thailand, at least, there's quite some examples of this already happening. So, for example, there's an organization called the Zero Bat Shop, which works to bring waste workers together, to support them to aggregate their materials, which helps to protect them from things like fluctuations in costs. Because we know that sometimes there's inadequate access to market information, and maybe this means if they collect one thing, it drops in value, then they end up having to dump it, which leads to environmental challenges. And also in the Zero Bat Shop, they can exchange waste for daily essentials. So it's not necessarily just money, but you can get your cooking supplies and etc. by exchanging the waste in. So I think this is quite an interesting model that could be potentially rolled out more or explored in different places.
Thank you.
Can I add something on the policy?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so I really echo, in fact, before coming, I echo what Chloe has just mentioned on not one size fit all, type of policy, especially when it's come to, gender differences, but also when we also consider other group of people, we have even talked about, people with disability, LGBTQI who have been part of the society, and in that every cycle of the life cycle of the circular economy and how they have been practiced. But I just want to also mention that when we talk about the policy, we often talk about enforcement, right? But how we can really work in moving forward, thinking about how we can see policy as a pathway of collaboration, and that how we can work with the policy maker in order to ensure that there's a really practical guideline in supporting, engaging, not only engaging, but supporting people to implement a policy, to be able to understand the policy and try to implement in the same way. Because when as we can see that many times the policy are very broad, and when you read it, you have a different interpretation of the policy. So how we can also see the policy enforcement as a positive pathway of collaboration, and the approach.
The devil is in the detail in terms of implementation. And I'd like to pass the floor to Dennis, who wanted to share something about illegal waste pickers as well.
Thank you, Elodie. I just wanted to share one point which I could not share also during the panel discussion, which might be interesting. I mean, a just transition, of course, also always means that existing workers, formal or informal workers, should not lose their jobs, right? And they should not lose their source of income. So one interesting point is also during these ICC discussions for the internet for the plastic treaty, always it comes up, when we don't produce plastics anymore, there will be no plastic waste, so there is actually no valuable waste for the waste pickers when they are collecting the waste. But we see in Myanmar and the International Alliance of Waste Pickers are also saying a little bit in this direction, is like, for example, in Myanmar, we don't have any glass factories in the country. So glass is very valuable, especially some drinks, like especially beer is always here, they sell it in glass. And the whole retake scheme for the glass bottles is actually over this, what I mentioned already, over the so-called illegal waste pickers. So the waste pickers are collecting the bottles and they are selling them back to the factories, which are cleaning them, and then they are refilling it and then selling back. So this is a very good functioning scheme. And also the International Alliance of Waste Pickers are saying, don't worry, just ban all the plastics and let us handle the reuse systems. Like, let them really make this, we don't need this very great systems in Germany, which are working quite well, like where you can bring your plastics back to the shop where you purchase and then you are getting back the money for it, the deposit for it. But also in Asian, in ASEAN countries, actually, we have all these waste pickers, formal and informal, who could be really utilized to bring in some this reuse and retake systems. Also, I think this is also an important point. Thank you.
Yes, that's an excellent point. We don't need to produce more, we just need to reuse. Yes. And that's a great point for the risk of job loss related to the International Treaty on Plastics. Thank you for making it, Dennis.
I'd like to add a little thing on what Dennis just said. It's not about a just transition, but I think it's such an interesting observation that glass recycling is a very important items in Myanmar, but in Thailand, waste pickers and the recyclers don't want glass because they're heavy and they cost less. So in Thailand, actually, the glass are the ones that are the problem. I just wanted to add that.
Yes, thank you, Sarasa, for adding that. And I may ask if we have a little bit more time. I was curious also about another point that Dr. Leapley made about how to deal with the different social, economic, and cultural interests and realities. So that is maybe related more to the ASEAN context, and if we see from an ASEAN perspective how this just transition will be handled. Maybe Kale, if you'd be so kind, you have some perspective because you were discussing about the Lao context and with Dr. Anthony, how you see, in your view, what will be the difference for this just transition to happen in the ASEAN specifically?
I think maybe when we look at ASEAN and each country have the different contexts, but I think there are so much we can learn from each other, and like especially like for example, I think when we look at the social and economic aspect of Laos, very different from a number of countries of ASEAN, but I think there are many countries that have been ahead, but also have been very successful in certain, how they come up with certain policy and practices. So I think there are a lot of opportunity for cross sharing and learning, and how we're going to see that we can benefit from being part of the different platform and forum in order to make sure that we learn from one another experience and then apply that. So I think in terms of the circular economy in Laos have been quite new, and I think most of it's now starting from agriculture side, and then slowly moving into tourism sector. But I think in Thailand, for example, as Muk said, they're more moving toward more like on the construction side of it. So also there are very different focus that each country has been doing. So I think and of course each different sector also has different when it comes to the socio-economic effect or impact on the different sector are very different. Yeah, I think sharing like this, for example, this circular economy can be a very good one of the good example of how we can learn more about what other countries and how we can then try to apply in what we are doing, but also looking again, going back to not one size fits all. So looking at what's worked for the countries and also ensuring that what we apply is do no do no harm approach, that we really understand the context and group of people that we work with, and then really understand what we bring is very meet the context that we work on. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kale, for these comments on the importance of cross-sharing in the ASEAN and also the very different contexts. So there will be a lot of learning. And I think the ASEAN Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform is very well placed to make that learning happen. And I know that Dr. Li would like to add a comment, so she'll be the next to speak. But I also like you, in the meantime, the other speakers, to reflect upon the questions that we've received in the chat. And for instance, there was a very interesting question related to the funding of this just transition. So if you have any ideas of how this could be financed or how this could actually happen in reality in the ASEAN context, and also a question about time. So how long this will take and how the policies need to understand that this may be a 10, 20, 30-year transition that we are facing, not a 5-year transition. Thank you. So I let the others think about it, maybe react, and I invite Dr. Li to add a comment.
I think one of the aspects of the EU Green Deal is its focus on legal and regulatory reform, or even policy reform. Right? It's a key component of the EU Green Deal.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, policy, regulatory reform, also some financing tools. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, so I think this is a tricky issue in the region where it's very diverse, and also this implies a kind of a hard approach where you have the laws first and then the behaviors will follow. But I think in reality, it may not necessarily be that case, right? So I think there are opportunities where, and because of the relatively less developed status of the countries in the region, I think there are opportunities to scale up all these practices, like what the other speaker mentioned before, like rubbish picking and so on. But the thing is, it is a key point of emphasis of the EU Green Deal, regulatory reform. So this focus is going to create tensions around the region, because, you know, how does this kind of approach fit in within the social and cultural context around the region? I mean, on the one hand, I can understand that you want to ensure that people's behaviors change, but it is so diverse. You know, maybe it is easy, this kind of approach is easier to implement in a country like Singapore, where it is a city-state, and less easy to implement in a country like Indonesia with millions of people, and, you know, they're barely above the poverty line. So how are they even going to understand what the basic terminologies mean in order to understand how they are going to adjust their behaviors? So this is going to create, I mean, a huge wave of changes, I mean, in the long run. But because the EU Green Deal stresses this is a key component of the EU Green Deal, we also have to understand what are the implications of this kind of emphasis on around the region. So I think it's worthy of discussion.
Yes, the EU Green Deal and other transitions also happening in the world. It's not only the EU, but also
Yeah, of course.
in
I mean,
China,
here I'm talking about, like, even in the different sectors, right? Labor and, you know, these different prisms through which we frame the discussions, because this is the entry point by which we understand or transform issues on the ground, right? And if we accept that paradigm, you accept everything that goes with it. all the politics, all the baggage, that comes from maybe from a time when ASEAN was not as active in such discussions, and how does that fit and interact with the different, the diverse interplay of these different things on how societies move. And also, ASEAN as an organization, as distinct from the individual states, also has a different perspective to consider, because unlike the EU, where you have a common and differentiated responsibility, whatever it is, ASEAN doesn't have that. So how do all these factors then interact? So I mean, these are very complex issues that require far more analysis and discussion.
Yeah, a webinar doesn't give it justice.
Yeah,
it's a very complex topic indeed. But we're just trying to scratch the surface. Maybe I could call upon, if I haven't seen a hand raised, if there's any of the speakers who'd like to answer one of the questions, then maybe I could call upon Naila, if you're feeling inspired to talk to us about how you think the timing of such a transition will happen. You were speaking about the experience of indigenous people in Thailand, so taking into account their situation and facing different ongoing transitions. How do you think this will pan out in terms of timing?
I think there are different timelines at play. There is indeed the development of policies, and that takes a lot of time. Practices at the corporate level that needs to be changed, like swift shift of business model. But there is also this reality on the ground that requires like measures to be taken now. So how do we, and that's more a question actually than a reply to the question, how do we make sure that those different objectives that are advancing at parallels meet at some point, and meet the sooner than the later. I don't have I don't have the answer to this question, but that's indeed a key element here. The time.
Yeah, I think none of us have it from the top of our head, and they come from discussion between all the parties, as we've been saying. Thank you so much, Naila. Maybe because we're reaching the end of our time, I'll pass the floor to our moderator, and thank all of the speakers. If I don't have the chance again to speak, thank you so much for all of your contributions. I know there will be concluding remarks from our chair.
Thank you very much, Elodie. As Elodie said, I'd like to invite Dr. Tony back to the stage for the concluding remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Sirsa. I noticed that Eric is not here and was not able to answer his question. So on his behalf, in my previous career, I worked on HIV, AIDS, and in the world of work, and I'd just like to share my experience on the ILO recommendation. I think it was recommendation 200 on HIV/AIDS in the world of work, and as Eric was at the ILO, what they did, I think a good practice, a good example was that because they're employees and government, when they wanted to do an ILO recommendation in HIV/AIDS in the world of work, they with regards to HIV, they had a sort of like a code of practice, and they did this in every country. And in Thailand, we had several people with HIV/AIDS at the meeting, and the Director General of the Department of Labor and Social Welfare drafted this announcement, a declaration, I think, and they had their key lawyers there and all of the representatives of HIV to go through it word by word. So I think that's the way the ILO operates, and it took a whole day just to go through it word by word. So I mean, that's a good example. It's focused mainly on labor, but when they included HIV in the world of work, they included the whole, representatives of people with HIV. So I thought that was rather inclusive, and as a participant, I was actually quite tired at the end of the day, to go through word by word and comments and things of that sort. So I just like to share that from the ILO perspective. Very thoughtful for me, I think, and actually quite interesting discussion, I think, from all of our participants, with regards to, and excellent ideas for me to personally follow up on. We've seen rooftop farming, I think, but we haven't visited them. And I think the discussion on energy transition and the structural inequality in the gender transition was highlighted, I think, from Kim Kao, and I thought that was quite interesting, and in the sense that it also was supported by the community, and not just the women that were involved. I think Lidley's point on stress, social and economic dimensions and green technology, and then how do we do that if we don't have a parliament, I guess, in ASEAN? How do we, with our diversity? I think that's the challenge. We have to do that. And I think I'd like to ask all of the presenters that you can help us by thinking regionally. I think it would help us in ASEAN because we are 10+1 countries to think regionally and to find commonalities between your local context. I think in my earlier PowerPoint, I did discuss that there is regional or commonalities within our values, within ASEAN centrality, and I think we need the challenge for ASEAN is we need a product. What is our ASEAN centrality? What is our ASEAN common values? We need to develop that, and I think if not, then regulatory policies, we need to share or just have a stakeholder agreement with our own, homegrown, from the bottom up regulations and policies. So I think other than that, then I think from an ASEAN perspective, then we will be confronted. We have to do it now. If we don't do it now, to share what are these means, what does this mean for regulation? What does this mean for policy? If not, then we will have to be confronted by externalities, and then it will just be, reactive rather than developing our own. So that's what I've taken from today's discussion, and I'd like to thank all of the participants, that have provided your valuable insights, and I'm sure that we will take these insights, and move forward with them. I do believe, even though the webinar series will be concluding, I think there will be more, and we continue to share discussions, and please reach out to us at the ASEAN Stakeholder platform. And I'd like to put in a plug. David has left for an EU ASEAN Business Coalition meeting right now, which he has to present. But please take a look. Please have a visit to our ASEAN Circular Economy Stakeholder platform, and there's an easy to share your best practice, click that you can access there quite conveniently. So thank you everybody for contribution. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tony, and a heartfelt thank you for the ASEAN Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform, Switch Asia Policy Support Component, all the speakers, moderator, and all our participants who are making today's event possible. And I'd like to invite you to keep an eye out for the promotion of our next webinar. We'll finish with a big bang. It will be the last webinar of this series. And it will be touching upon something that Dr. Tony has already briefly touched upon in his introduction session already. We'll take a deep dive into what the circular economy means in the specific country context within ASEAN. So do be sure to join us, and thank you very much, and hope to see you guys again. Have a good day.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.